for compliance officers to gain influence, they must first know the business, which is one of the most cliched phrases around, although it is true that you must. So I was also hoping for some practical advice and tips about what should compliance officers do at that bridge building phase, the trust building phase, to be able to get to know the business. And I will throw that out. I mean, maybe Hemma, I'll start with you again, and then Melanie, and then Lisa Beth. Like, what would you advise people to try to do to roll up their sleeves and get to know the business?
So it's absolutely imperative that you want to know the business you're working for. At the same time, we want to have a bit of humility as well and understand that we're not ever going to know the business as well as our front line. And so instead, another phrase that Nick and I like to use, we want to crowdsource risk intelligence. What does that mean? That means leveraging radical curiosity, compassion, empathy, listening, seeking to understand rather than ever thinking you're going to learn it and know, because the business moves faster than you ever will. So if you can seek to understand, leverage the strengths of those on the front line, make sure you've got that communication line open so that you are building trust, then you will be brought into those conversations. The other piece is you're not just there to learn and then advise. You're there to almost in a coaching position, take in the information and then also seek information and input on how we can best practically mitigate the risks we identify. Most of the time, the best controls are ones that have come from the people that I'm trying to help. But they're the ones that have the better ideas, practically what will work. Again, the only other thing is, remember, it's a journey. We don't want to just learn, think we've arrived, and then we're done. We have to put our business partners on a journey and go with them. And so that is, I think my favorite phrase there is your maturity journey. Where are we on the maturity journey? And how can we mitigate risk on a journey? So a number of practical things I try to do to make sure that we're on a ride along, we're there learning with them, but also having the humility to understand that we might never know what's coming tomorrow, but we'll equip them with the skills, teach them to fish rather than just give the fish every time we see an issue.
I would say I love your point about the best controls often come from the business. And if we want the business to own the risk and own the control, which we do, that's the best practice. We all say that's how you do it. And I just wanted to call out that point. Melanie, let's go to you next, and then Lisa Beth, and then Nick. Like, what else would you recommend to sort of build that culture, that foundation of trust, and to learn the business and make sure people know, okay, this compliance officer, they're for real?
Well, I mean, I've spent the last probably 12, 13 years working in some kind of private equity role because I was with a private equity owned business. And then now I work for a private equity firm. And so I do a lot of diligence and then integration. And so just practically speaking, from repeatedly getting to know new businesses and trying to establish what I want the culture and the relationship with the compliance officer to be, I think one of the most helpful things is I had a good friend and mentor give me a book called The First 90 Days once when I started a new role. And it really talks about, those first 90 days, you really need to be kind of a sponge. Like, you don't want to walk in and before you've spent any time getting the lay of the land, start making recommendations and giving orders. You really want to soak in the culture and learn as much about an organization as you can, because they will appreciate that, and it will make a big difference, both in getting to the point where, as Hemma said, you can get some of those solutions from the front lines because they're willing to talk to you, because they feel like you have taken the time to spend time with them and see how things really work, not just, like you can read a lot in a data room, but when you go spend time with the people who are doing the work, you're going to have a completely different perspective on how an organization works and probably what the risks are, which goes back to Hemma's crowdsourcing too, right? Like, that's what makes Waze different from Google Maps, is that there's someone saying, hey, there's a pothole on this road, or there's construction going on over here. And if you don't take the time to get to know where the potholes are first, and you just start giving ivory tower advice based on what the policy says is going on, you lose your credibility. So I think it really is taking the time, spend time with people who are doing the work so that you have relationships and credibility when you start making recommendations.
So, Lisa Beth, let me also put that same question to you. And maybe, again, I'll put a little bit of extra spin on it. I wholly agree with the idea that compliance officers should at first slow down and listen. But I also sometimes wonder, how often do managements sort of have high expectations that you're supposed to hit the ground running and you're supposed to solve all my compliance problems right now, and it's already 30 days in? What's going on? Like, is that a risk?
That's always a risk.
How do you get around it? And what else would you advise for compliance officers at that sort of early stage of engaging with a new company?
So I'll take that in a little bit different direction, because while it's really important to be a voracious student of your business and your industry, whatever that may be, and lucky for us as compliance professionals, we can go to lots of different industries and be very useful. What I would say is, I think one of the things that we need to do is to use psychology and use bias to our benefit. And Nick and I had a long conversation about bias isn't bad. Bias is what keeps us alive. But use things like affinity bias to connect with people and find ways to string the things that are common and your likability along, so that A, they're not overly harsh in terms of expecting you to know everything. They like you, so they want to help you. And you are able to have more influence. So I think that one of the things we really need to do is say, like, how can we be alike and connect really deeply very early? Because the more they see you as one of us, in addition to the responsibilities you have to be independent, et cetera, the more likely you are to get the help all the way along the line and be given the benefit of the doubt. When you say, hey, to put together a whole program soup to nuts, it's going to take at least 9 months, a year before we can get to all of these big projects. We have to do it, in a logical sequence. They will give you the benefit of the doubt if they like you and believe that you are one of them and working together collaboratively.
All right. Nick, what would you say to all this?
The thing that I would add is, to kind of dovetail off of what Lisa Beth just said, is like, how do we create that affinity bias? What's our mechanism and our catalyst to create that affinity bias within them? I think the best hack for that is what I call the mentee chair hack. So everybody, if you divided the world up into smart people and dumb people, let's say it's 50-50. 99% of people think they're in the smart people bucket, right? I sure think I am. So everybody also likes to give advice. And so one of the best things you can do when you're new, or when you're trying to, conquer some new influence ground, is to create a mentee situation where you go to this person and say, hey, I'm new, or hey, I don't know enough about your business, and then ask a how or a what question. How or what questions are very open questions that when sitting in that mentee chair, you're going to get a lot of insight, and you're going to subconsciously ingratiate yourself to that individual. You're going to get some insights, so you're not going to waste your time chasing after a phantasm, and you're going to help build some of that affinity bias because you're demonstrably trying to be one of them, as Lisa Beth said. I'm trying to get on your page. I'm trying to see your business from this perspective. And I think, the last thing I'll say is starting one of those conversations with a little frame around what your job is and what you're trying to do. I'm trying to build a culture of integrity to de-risk the organization and improve the bottom line. I'm trying to do something to really unleash this business so we can run down the road faster without going out of bounds. I want to make sure I understand your business and so what are the biggest risks you see in your business? You know what I'm saying? That kind of a conversation where you're really open to their input and their influence is going to build a lot of trust, because there's been studies that have shown that the number one key to influencing someone else is them believing that you're open to their influence. So if you can start that relationship and you can start that interaction by being open to that influence, it's really going to compress the time. It's going to let you time travel in terms of the connection you're able to make.